Yo, this is Bryan Boorstein. Welcome to the Boom Boom Performance Podcast.
What is going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Boom Boom Performance Podcast. This is the one-stop shop for all things coaching. I did not say training and nutrition this time, so if you guys listen often, I switched up the intro right there. The reason I did that is because it's simple. We go so much deeper than training and nutrition. I am a strength trainer. I am also a nutrition coach, so we talk a lot about that, but coaching is so much deeper than that, so we're going to touch on all things inside this podcast. Anything related to personal development, we're probably going to cover it because my goal is to help you develop into the best person possible. We're going to coach you through the speakers. If you have not heard this podcast before, if you're new here, please do me a favor. Definitely subscribe to the show so you can keep getting updates on new episodes. But go check out the top 4 episodes inside the show notes in the description. I dropped the links for those. It's going to be the nutrition FAQ, the training FAQ, my personal journey and story into fitness, and then last but not least, nutritional periodization, which is something I am very passionate about. Today's podcast is with my good friend, Bryan Boorstein. Bryan has done damn near everything in the training space. He is really well known for his program design and having a wide variety of not only knowledge but also experience in the trenches in so many avenues. I'm talking training professional athletes, celebrities, CrossFit, people going to the CrossFit Games, owning a CrossFit gym, but also jumping heavily into different styles of bodybuilding as well. So this is a guy that really knows how to blend multiple modalities and focuses of the training world, of different training worlds, and kind of bring them together and bridge the gap. So I really enjoyed this podcast with him, especially because he's a good friend of mine, but also because this is actually our second episode. So this is like part 2 of him coming on the show. I'll link the first episode in the description so you can go kind of learn more about Bryan, learn about his philosophies, learn about his journey, his story. But today is a training Q&A. So we actually reached out to both of our followings. We got the best questions that were sent in, and we covered those today, which was really fun because usually we don't do Q&As with guests. It's usually specifically like an interview on their story, what they specifically do, what special niche they have, whatever it may be. But today we literally just covered a ton of questions. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy this because I know you guys love the Q&As that I do. Well, now I have a partner to do it with me, and we're doing all things training. Guys, if you enjoy this episode, if you enjoy training Q&A, if you enjoy program design, if you want to learn more about this stuff, the best thing you can do, the thing I always recommend to people when I get this question all the time, how can I learn more? How can I educate myself better? How can I be a better coach? How can I do this on my own? How can I be my own coach? And one of the responses I always give is attend seminars, attend live events. Like, yes, certifications are great. Yes, courses are great. Yes, read every day you can. I do it still to this day. I check out blogs. I listen to podcasts. All those things are great. But there's something about connecting in person, paying to be at an event, taking notes, asking questions live in person, and then getting hands-on with the coaches that have experience in the trenches. You have an opportunity to do this in Seattle with myself and Lauren Conlon. We have so much experience in this coaching game. She has a high-level college degree in this field. So it's not just a random degree. It is literally she is in the trenches in Bill Campbell's lab, which is known as the physique laboratory. This is like the one place that they do the best studies and research about physique science. So she is coming from the trenches. She has a ton of experience in the professional physique world, bikini, figure, bodybuilding, so on and so forth. I have a ton of experience with physique, bikini, bodybuilding, CrossFit. We both have worked with WWE professionals. Like, we have dove so deep into this coaching, training, and nutrition field, and we're coming together to put on a seminar to educate you on how to get the best results possible for yourself and for your clients. So no matter who you are, if you are looking to change your physique, achieve your best physique, or help others do that, you need to be at this seminar. You need to learn from us. You need to interact with us. You need to connect with us. And then on the second day, you need to train with us so we can critique you, give you feedback, and show you exactly how to do the movements properly throughout your exercise. So this is going to be a seminar that touches all things nutrition with Lauren, all things training program design with myself. And then day 2, the bonus day, we actually get to train with you and really get hands-on to help you make the most out of your workouts, guys. I'm super fired up about this. There's nothing I love more than connecting and meeting people in person and really diving into the science so it's applicable to the people at the event. So if you're in Seattle, if you're in the Northwest, or if you're ready to fly out, I know we got a bunch of people already flying cross the country to be here. It's going to be amazing. I cannot wait. There's going to be a link to purchase your tickets in the show notes. And if you have any questions at all, you guys have my email. It's also in the show notes, cody@boomboomperformance.com. Email me any question you have. I would love to chat with you, love to tell you more, and love to get you at this seminar. Now, before I get into this show with Bryan, I just want to do a quick reminder, guys. The best way for you to help me grow and spread this message, remember, this is a free podcast where I'm just trying to deliver as much value as possible to you so people can get better results completely free. If you want to help me with that movement and help me reach more people, the best way to do that is not only leave a 5-star rating and review on iTunes, yes, but take a screenshot of this show, post on your Instagram story, tag myself at Cody.boomboom, tag Bryan at Bryan Boorstein. Both of our handles are going to be in the show notes. Tag us. Let us know who you are. We want to thank you for listening, and we want to thank you for spreading the message with us. All right, guys, without any further ado, let's get on to this training Q&A with Bryan Boorstein. All right, my man, Bryan Boorstein. Dude, I'm excited to have you back on the podcast. It's always great chatting with you, staying up to date with you. And I'm really excited for this because for those of you listening, we've never really done a Q&A podcast with another person. It's always just me. So I'm excited to actually have people come on for a second round and do a Q&A. This is the first one, but just thinking about this and Bryan and myself collecting questions for this, I'm actually already thinking about who I want to have back on the show so we can do this again because this is going to be really fun. So for those not listening, just because we have to give a brief introduction for you, who is Bryan Boorstein in a nutshell?
Bryan Boorstein is a vet of 20 plus years from the training world and went through some bodybuilding stuff in my early years, more kind of 5x5 strength training, progressed into a CrossFit space for almost a decade, and then been kind of more into this hybrid bodybuilding focused, physique focused kind of space for the last couple of years.
It's a very humble and brief introduction from Bryan, guys. If you haven't heard episode 1, which I already mentioned in the intro, go listen to the episode 1 because he does have a really interesting story. And this is one of those guys that's really kind of had a crazy, and it's actually perfect that your business has evolved because what I'm about to say has like a crazy evolution through these different phases of training. So it's always fun running his programs and training with him and talking with him because he really does understand multiple facets of training. And I think that's so important as a coach. Like you can't be grounded in one area. So Bryan's a really good example of how to do it right. And it's actually a perfect person to get into this podcast because we're going to be doing a ton of questions strictly on training. So let's just get right into it, dude. The first one is pretty basic, but I think we could give an extremely complex answer on this, but I like it. Should you dial down volume in a cut? And if so, how do you do that?
Yeah, totally. This is actually one of the questions that came from my Evolved training community. And this woman specifically is part of my physique program. And it's actually a really good question because I believe my physique program is going to be a program that's pretty suitable for whether you're gaining or cutting. But within kind of the Facebook community that I have for the program, I try to do a thorough job of helping people individualize what is basically a generic program. So in our physique cycle right now, we're doing a little bit of volume accumulation where we're progressing from kind of lower effort, lower volume work, and then building up volume over the course of the mesocycle, deloading, dialing back, and kind of restarting over again. So in relation to her question, I think that the thing to keep in mind primarily with this is that the minimum amount of volume that you're going to need, minimum effective volume as Mike would call it, is going to go up a little bit as you're dieting. And this is just a result of having less total calories in, creating less of an anabolic environment. So you're going to need more training volume to make sure that you don't lose muscle as you're cutting. And a lot of that obviously depends on how many calories you're cutting, et cetera, how steep your deficit is. But I don't think it changes a whole lot. I think biofeedback and auto-regulation become extremely important words to include if you're going to be embarking on training in a volume style while cutting. So, while I say you need a little bit more volume to be able to meet your minimum effective requirements, the other side of that equation is that the maximum amount of volume that you can do also decreases. So theoretically, if we have 3 sets in the beginning of our mesocycle and call it 6 sets at the end of the mesocycle for somebody that's in a maintenance or a surplus calories, I think what happens is that window shrinks down a little bit if you're dieting, and therefore you probably need a little bit more volume on the front end and a little bit less volume on the back end. And then there's kind of a whole lot of manipulation or understanding of your personal feedback how your energy is and how your body's responding and whether you're still getting pumps or how impactful the soreness is and the fatigue on the following days and things like that. So that would be kind of my like super short answer, and I'm very curious what you have to say on that front as well.
I would agree. I think that when we are dieting, our intensity goes down. So it's almost one of those things where I think your volume's gonna go down, literally, but not necessarily on paper. And what I mean by that is if you can try to maintain your volume in a cut, I think that's probably a good thing because like you said, you actually need that volume in order to maintain muscle during cut. As we know, like when you're dieting or cutting, you're not really trying to build muscle, you're trying to maintain. And what's the best way to maintain muscle? Well, it's to train like you're building muscle. So bring your protein up and train with enough volume to quote unquote build muscle. You're just going to maintain it. But I mean, if you're on a serious diet, like I have a couple power lifters I'm putting through a diet right now and their strength is going up, but the rate of loss is like so tiny and we're taking so long to do it because they have to improve strength. So in a normal person, if they're really trying to get after a cut, I think that your volume is going to drop just because the weight lifted. So your intensity is going to drop over time. Maybe not by a ton, but like the poundage you're lifting is probably going to drop. But most of us don't record that as volume. We're usually looking at sets and reps,
Yep.
Which is what I recommend just because it's less confusing. Like looking at tonnage is just so complicated. Unless you're a power lifter, I don't think it's necessary. But no, I 100% agree. I think the only thing I would add is that your volume probably will dial down a little bit, but it's just a matter of your intensity or your total weight lifted dropping a little bit. And if you can just strive to maintain the weight you're lifting, I think you'd be in a good place.
Yeah, I mean, anyone that can go through a cut and maintain strength, like you come out of that cut and you're like, oh shit, I just maintained more or less all my muscle mass. And I know that strength isn't a perfect proxy for muscle mass 1-to-1, but it's a decent proxy. And if you can go through a cut and maintain strength, that's great. Especially when you consider things like your NEAT is probably going to drop just because you have a little bit lower energy expenditure, which might actually be part of the reason why maintaining training volume is important in a cut as well. But in her case, I just would say that biofeedback, man, like making sure that she feels good, that she's going into the gym and she's not completely depleted, and possibly staying a little bit more shy of failure. On this program, I'm trying to keep people, for the most part, 1 to 2 reps shy. And I know that we'll delve into failure training here a little bit later in this discussion. But given that science has kind of shown that you don't need to go to failure, I think that when you're in a cut specifically is a perfect time to make sure that you're avoiding those like really hard reps that are going to cause additional fatigue that's going to be a little bit harder to recover from.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I actually like the point about NEAT, man. I never thought about that, but that's actually a really good point and reason to keep volume up. 100% agree. I think that's a great answer. I think that not enough people actually record like that biofeedback. And I know we're going to like, I've just got to bring it up because you mentioned failure. I went back and did a program. It's a Christian Thibodeau program I think it's called Built for Bad. It's from T Nation. But like, dude, I did it when I was, I think like 18 years old and I got phenomenal gains. But I could handle way more at 18 years old than I could today. I was probably like 20, but still, same thing. And I tried to do it. And it's basically a full body program, 5 days a week. And you stay within that 85 to 95% of 1 RM for everything. And it's literally like 5 rep, 4 rep, 3 rep, 2 rep, 1 rep of, I think it's deadlift, floor press, military press, chin up, and then like a high pull or something. Like it's very intense. It was great. And like the first 3 weeks I felt amazing because my nervous system was just on fire. So I just kept going. But this is the problem with going to failure or doing too much or not watching your volume or your intensity while you're cutting is like, I just kept going. And then after however many weeks, I think I only got like 3 weeks in, like when I needed a deload, but I kept going, it just hit me. And I literally felt like moody, tired, fatigued, like almost depressed because I was just like, man, I just don't want to do anything. And it's just like a good reason, like you can't push that boundary too far because it will literally hit you before you realize it.
Yeah, dude, I 100% relate. And I think that was kind of the way that's what defined my, like almost my entire CrossFit career was just over fatigued and constantly depleted and never really understanding that there was a better way or that my body wanted this rest or needed this rest that I wasn't giving it.
Yeah. All right, dude, let's get to the next one. This is a longer question, but I think it's really good. why do so many bodybuilders do lower weight, higher rep routines? I realize that helps create a pump from inflammation and or water retention, but I don't think that pump actually lasts very long. Yet pro bodybuilders are not small or weak by any means. So do the best bodybuilders actually follow a lower rep, heavier weights on the regular, or just use higher rep workout for shows? I guess what I'm asking is, what's the benefit of progressive loading program in a high rep program, 12 plus reps, versus a low rep 3 to 5 rep program? I guess they're just asking for pro bodybuilders, like, why do pro bodybuilders typically stay in that super high rep zone? Is that necessary, and do any of them drop down low? And I think rather than us speaking for professional bodybuilders, I think the best way to kind of tackle this question would be, like, when do those type of programs make sense? Why would we do those type of programs? So on and so forth, in both categories of low rep and high rep.
Yeah, I mean, that was exactly how I was going to attack this too. Like, I can't speak for for a pro bodybuilder and what they do and why they do it, or what they put on Instagram. But I think the key word here is periodization. And studies have shown recently in last couple of years that anything from that like 5 to 30 rep loading zone is going to work.
Yeah.
Since Greg Nuckols kind of coined the term hard sets for volume, I think that that's just perfect. I mean, if you do a hard set of 8 reps or you do a hard set of 30 reps, you're still doing a hard set of work, and the hypertrophic response tends to demonstrate relative similar effects at both ends of the rep range. So I think the key is that you want to train in all the rep ranges. Like, you want to work those super slow twitch muscle fibers in the 20 to 30 rep range. You want to work the fast twitch muscle fibers in more of like the 5 to 8 or 5 to 10 range. You probably want to do a majority of your work in the 10 to 20 range. I know that's like a really, really big range, and a set of 10 is very different than a set of 20. The way that I tend to implement it in my programming is, for that 10 to 20 range, is I'll start my first set of an exercise in like 15 to 20 range, and then I'll just kind of let the reps trickle off and drop set to set, so that by the third or fourth set, down into that like 10 to 12 range, and I'm able to hit that full spectrum and get the muscle response that way. So as to why they do that, again, I think they just need to hit all those different rep ranges, hit all the different types of muscle fibers. I think whether you do that within like an undulating fashion in a week, where you have like a day of low reps, a day of medium reps, a day of high reps, I don't think that necessarily matters in the structure of your program, whether you do that or whether you do like a 3-month or 2-month cycle of lower rep focus, a 2 or 3 month cycle of mid rep focus, a 2 or 3 month cycle of higher rep focus. If you're going to do a bunch of high reps, I see no reason to not kind of institute some metabolite training in there and get a bunch of metabolic stress, do some supersets and some drop sets and some myo reps, and really kind of utilize the pump for what it is, right? I mean, science has shown that the pump has some benefit. I don't necessarily chase the pump, but I think that the pump is a good sign that what you're doing is working. And I also think that you should be able to get a pump from sets of 5 to 10, maybe not as drastic or as kind of shirt ripping as you would in a set of like 20 to 30. But you should be able to be getting pumps from 5 to 10. And if you're not, I think that you need to look at some kind of outside factors a little bit.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think because he mentioned bodybuilders doing that pre-show, I think he's assuming that that's something they do right before the show. I think that is a result of what we just talked about. Like, as you diet down, you have less energy. You can't push heavy weights. So you have to make up for that volume somehow. What's the easiest way to do it? Lighter weights, higher reps. And I think that's what it comes down to. A lot of old school bodybuilders, if you look at them, they do really, really high rep because it's the easiest way to crank out a ton of volume without smashing your nervous system. If you were to hit enough volume to grow doing just sets of 3 to 5, you would just be fried all the time. You'd just be toasted. Sure. So I think I 100% agree with you that you need to do all of it. And that's what my answer would have been too. I think I like programming undulation when I don't know how long a client's going to be with me. So if I know somebody's going to be doing this program for a month, maybe 3, if I'm lucky 4 or 5, then I'm probably going to have a upper lower split with one day that's a little bit lower rep zone, a little bit higher rep zone on the next day. Kind of like a conjugate style, right? Like a max effort and a dynamic effort. But if I have somebody that's going to be with me for a year, I actually do like doing phases of like, hey, we're going to try to build strength for 2 months, like just lower rep stuff. And then we're going to slowly accumulate volume into the accumulation phase. And then we spend time, like you said, in a higher rep zone. And then I also think adherence is something to mention there, dude. Like for me, I like starting my workout with a little bit lower rep. I know like I get a really good pump on like low rep bench press for some reason, like just heavy chest work. Like I enjoy it. It's fun, but I also like finishing my workout with pump like work, like just high rep curls and high rep push-ups and dips. So I think there is something to say about like using all these things and just putting it in a way inside your program that makes you actually fucking enjoy it. So you stick to it.
Yeah, that's such a good point too, man. And I really like what you said about undulating with a client when you don't know how long they're going to be with you, because it's great in theory to be like, we're going to do this macro cycle where we have a 12-month block and we're going to go like 3 hypertrophies, then we're going to go a session of strength and kind of dial back the volume a little bit, and then we're going to do some metabolite work and blah, 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 and all this stuff. But it doesn't really work if clients aren't going to stick with it. So as far as this question and what you brought up in regards to bodybuilders peaking for a show, my guess would be that they probably have an entire 6-month or year plan, and that the end of their plan, the last month or so before the show, they're trying to mitigate joint fatigue that might come with heavier reps. When you're dieting, you don't have as much kind of plasticity. Is that the right word? Plasticity within your body and stuff. So I think that doing higher rep work, like you said, accumulating volume with lower loads is probably the reasoning behind that, and probably less about like, I'm going to get this pump a month out that's going to stick with me for the remaining month, and then I'm going to stand on stage looking super jacked.
Yeah, exactly. And even to just highlight what you mentioned before with the metabolite stuff, so this person knows, because I think it sounded like they almost didn't understand that getting a pump isn't just about like this morning I had an upper body workout. Like I walked, because we have a garage gym. I walked in the kitchen and I had a really good pump, and I was like, it feels great. Went and took a shower and it's pretty much gone. It's not that I'm doing this work to be like that 5 minutes after my workout, I feel like the man. It has to do with building lactic acid and building metabolites inside of your muscle, because both of those things have been shown in research to actually create muscle growth. What's the word? Is it sarcoplasmic hypertrophy that I'm thinking of? And it's basically, okay, so the pump, like, that's why, like, some bodybuilders look kind of like bubbly growth, right? And then you see those guys that are super strong. They're not huge, but they just look like a fucking rock. They're just dense. Yeah. It's 2 different goals, right? And when you do that pump work, I think there is more sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. It's probably going to lead to more of that pumped look. And that's what bodybuilders want, And I think in my opinion, I like that look, but I also like the dense look. And there's no research to prove that low rep stuff is going to build like a dense body, but I tend to believe that. I know a lot of people from anecdote just kind of feel that way. And I think that's a good reason to mix them both.
Absolutely. Yeah. Bro science has a place.
Yeah. 100% bro science, but I believe it.
Yeah.
All right. So this is perfect time because we've mentioned it twice. So it's about necessary for this question, but when, if ever, is it necessary to train to failure?
I love this question. I know we kind of talked about this before the show a little bit. Like I said in my intro, I've been training for over 20 years at this point. And when I started in 1997, I didn't really know any other way but to train to failure. Like, if I wasn't going to failure, I didn't know what I was doing. As I kind of gained more understanding and kind of became more connected within the industry and started reading research and stuff like this, I realized something that I think the bros realized immediately, which was you can either do a shit ton of sets sub failure, or you can do a very small amount of sets to failure. And I think that that's an important thing to keep in mind throughout this entire discussion of failure, is that your proximity to failure depends a lot on the amount of volume of work that you're doing. And I don't think that there's necessarily a right way or a wrong way. There might be a way that's better for you. But as it relates to my story, I can 100% say that in the last year of 20 plus years of training, the last year, I've finally kind of accepted this notion of, let me increase my volume, but pull back on the failure, and, mentally having to accept that I'm okay with this change. And I had doubts where I was like, oh man, if I'm not training to failure, like, am I really losing these gains that are happening? Like, because the bros back in the 90s, right? Everything was, if you don't do the last rep, that's the one that matters. And so it's been about a year now of me kind of backing off the failure and upping the volume. And I can honestly say that I feel so much better this way. Yes, my gym sessions have gotten a little bit longer as I try and accumulate volume and still try to stay shy of failure and still kind of get enough stimulus for that muscle. So that's one thing that, if you're short on time, then training to failure might be a better option for you than trying to push volume sub failure. But one really cool aspect of failure is that it's another way in which you can overload the muscle. So, right, we have weight. You can add more weight to the bar. We have volume, the amount of sets that you're doing or total amount of work that you're doing. And we have frequency, how often you're going to be working a muscle group. And if you're going to progress these things week to week, it would kind of make sense that you also progress your proximity to failure. So I really like this approach where you have your deload week where everything is super easy and chill. And then you have a kind of intro week or a primer week, as you might want to call it. And then you build on there and kind of building proximity to failure, building sets, building load. All of these things are elements that you can manipulate within your training to help you kind of progress toward a goal. And then when your fatigue reaches a point where you're just no longer feeling strong and positive in your sessions, you're no longer feeling that level of motivation, maybe you're having a little bit of anxiety and you're like, oh my God, I have to take a set of back squats to like 1 rep shy of failure today. This is going to kill me. Then maybe at that point you deload, you kind of flush out all the fatigue and rebuild that process back up again.
I love that, dude. I actually really, really like where you took this because this is something I've been experimenting with lately as well. And I think when you're an advanced lifter, it's actually really cool to play with that progression of like reps and reserve kind of thing, where like week 1 of your program, you might leave like 3 to 4 reps in reserve on your heavy compounds and let's say like 2 to 3 on your accessories or your isolation, right? And then the next week you drop it down 1. Next week you drop down 1. By your 4th week, you're doing like 1 rep left in the tank on your compounds, and I would say like half a rep or like clean failure. I don't think anybody should ever go to technical failure where you literally cannot perform a rep. But like my last rep is like, if I do another rep, I'm swinging the weight, like it's not going to be good. So it's pretty much failure. And then you deload, right? And I think doing that is actually a really cool way to progress your effort across weeks. And it gives you a way to control it. Because now when I started doing this, because beforehand I would find myself like, man, I feel good today. And I would go to like maybe 1 rep in the reserve. And then the next day I didn't feel so good and I'd bring it back. But this gave me a way to control it and actually see progression. So I like where you took that because I've been doing that quite a bit and it's helped me a ton.
Yeah, dude, for sure. It's increased my kind of excitement to train as well. I mean, after 20 years, you constantly need these kind of new and innovative concepts and ideas that you can create awesome data sheets in Excel and like start analyzing your results and count volume and blah, 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 and all the different things that us dorks do. So it's been like a really cool way for me to get excited to go back in the gym and be like, all right, I'm going to take this set this week to 3 reps shy and let's see how that feels. And then, increasing, as you said, week to week. And I 100% agree with everything you said about, maybe 1 rep, 2 reps shy on compounds, and then right to that point of clean failure on the isolations. I can't remember the last time I actually failed a rep. Like, I think that's an advanced thing that you and I understand, like our body's response to stuff. But yeah, I can't remember the last time I was like doing a bicep curl and I was like, I failed a rep or anything like that. It's just kind of like you build this innate understanding with where your fatigue level is. So yeah, it's been nothing short of just an incredible addition into my programming that I use for myself and clients.
And I think like you mentioned this, like when we were chatting beforehand, like there's been research that's come out that showed, I don't know the exact numbers, but I want to say like anything within 80% of your 1 rep max is actually going to provide the same amount of progress with significantly less damage to the nervous system. So when we go in, it's like, okay, yes, and I think this is why I like my podcast I did with Austin Current. Like you can smash the muscle without smashing your joint in your nervous system. right? Create effort by finding your mind muscle connection. Create effort by slowing down and create intensity that way versus load or literally going to absolute failure, because those are the things that are going to hurt your joints and hurt your nervous system. And those are the two improvements I've seen a lot, like way less achy joints, and my nervous system just feels so much better. And they showed like people are able to hit that muscle more quickly or like sooner if they do it this way, because their recovery is so much better. If you absolutely go to failure, you're going to need to take a week off of training from that muscle. And we know that's not advantageous because your frequency and your volume is going to lower at that point. So even now studies are showing that, which I thought was actually pretty interesting to hear that. It's not something I was expecting to hear, but it just shows you that if you can just stay within that 80% of intensity, you don't need to go balls to the wall all the time. It just save yourself from it.
Yeah, I think the studies are showing more or less recently that 2 reps shy of failure is like the perfect place where you get a shit ton of stimulus on the muscle, but you also avoid the exponential increase in fatigue that accumulates as you get 1 rep from failure and then 2 failure. So I really like that. And then to your point about feeling the muscle more and the mind muscle connection, man, on my deload week last week, I was doing hammer strength rows with like 50% of what I usually use. And the cramp that I was feeling in my lats was like so miserable that I almost was like, this is too hard for deload week. But at the same time, I felt like I had 10 reps left in reserve, you know?
Yeah.
So it's cool when you're able to kind of utilize these lighter weight weeks or the deload week or whatever as a means of really just understanding like how can I drive my elbow back so that lat is like contracted in the perfect way versus just trying to move the weight from point A to point B.
That's a really good point. I think deload weeks are the perfect time to like double down on form, especially if you're lowering volume. Like I know for me, the easiest way is like I'll drop a set here and there, and then I drop intensity pretty low. So it just gives you more time in the gym to literally just slow down and spend on that. Because this person wanted to know when is a good time to implement failure. I mean, we both already said, probably like week 3 or 4 towards the end before your deload week. I tend to deload every 5th week, but I have clients that deload every 4th week. It's kind of individual. So probably every 4th or 5th week, like on your last week or 3rd or 4th week, your last week of each block, you could probably push that closer to failure. I would personally say the only time you should really go to true failure is on something that is either very lightweight or the injury risk is very low. So for example, an inverted row, you're probably not going to fail at that because your nervous system taps out. It's probably because your grip, because maybe you're trying to lose weight and you're too heavy to row yourself up that many times. Your muscles aren't going to complete failure. You just can't lift your body up. That's probably going to be okay to go close to failure as long as you're not compromising form. And then something like a lateral raise, for example, you're not going to destroy your shoulder joint or your nervous system if you're doing it with good form and light weights. Like something I love, and you might have done this before, is Joe DeFranco has that shoulder shocker extra. It's like a shoulder complex, and it just demolishes your shoulders, but you feel really good afterwards. It's not, you use like 10-pound weights, so it's nothing like
lactic acid accumulation.
100%. Yeah. So things that you can do it with lactic acid, I think you're fine to go to failure.
Yeah, I think as well, I deload every 4th or 5th week too. And as far as this person's question, I think if you're going to go to failure, it should absolutely be the last week. And if you want to test and see whether going to failure was a good idea or not, just one time in your life, maybe you go to failure and then you're like, okay, I still feel good. I'm going to do another week to failure and see what happens. If you are still able to improve your performance despite going to failure the prior week, and now you go to failure the next week and you're getting another rep or you're adding weight and hitting the same amount of reps, then you probably can handle failure relatively well, at least for 2 weeks in a row. Who knows if you can handle 3 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever, but at least that's a good proxy for, hey, I didn't get completely depleted and my body isn't completely fucked up from this, and I'm able to manifest at least a similar or increased level of strength the following week.
That's a really good point, dude, because I think that might also be a proxy of, oh shit, maybe I'm not doing enough volume. Because I know for me, if I was really short on my volume curve and I went to failure, I'd probably be fine. But if I was doing the right amount of volume to grow and then I went to failure, I probably would not be fine. So it's probably a good test to say, oh shit, maybe I should do more in my training. And it's also a good test every once in a while to do if you want to do like an AMRAP. So I know for me, like, I don't do any of that right now just because I don't need to. But I know for a while, like I didn't enjoy going to like a 1 rep max because it just caused injury or complete failure. So I would do like 60% of my 1 rep max, or put my body weight on a deadlift bar and do an AMRAP set of clean form. If I could get 25 reps with my body weight, like that's a good like metric to look at. And in 6 months, if I do it again and I get 27, I'm building strength without having to put myself through a 1 rep. So there is times and places. It's just very few and far between. I think the last time I went to failure on like a full workout was at a hotel. I had like 30 minutes to train, and like I was doing like a full body workout. So it was like almost like Dorian Yates style, like with dumbbells though. I'm gonna do 1 or 2 sets to failure of everything.
Well, it comes back to what I said in the very beginning of this question, where it was you can either train to failure with lower volume, or you can train sub-failure with higher volume. So it all kind of comes full circle.
100%. That's a great way of looking at it. All right. So the next one is, when trying to gain some weight. Oh, this is a good one. This is from, I believe you sent this to me, and I believe she is going or is in the CrossFit Games, correct?
Yeah, Cheryl Nasso, she qualified for the CrossFit Games as a Masters this year. She's a super savage athlete, and she contacted me and was like, hey, I wish I got this question in before the podcast. And I was like, you're lucky the podcast is tomorrow. So here we are.
Perfect. She said, when trying to gain some weight and wanting to put on muscle, how do you know that you are getting in enough volume to create growth/strength without just putting on weight? I am a CrossFitter trying to put on some muscle and size. So I'm actually really interested in your responses, because you've been in that space for longer, and you're one of the only people in that space that really looks at the bodybuilding research. I shouldn't say bodybuilding, because there's very little research on true bodybuilders, because it's impossible to change those people's lives for a study, unfortunately. But you know what I mean, strength research in the body.
Hypertrophy research, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I actually think this is a really hard question. I think there's so many different ways you can take it, so many variables that I think we don't know the answers to. I know that Cheryl trains a lot. She's in that typical CrossFit space. She's a competitor, meaning that she not only has to train for strength, maybe size, but she also has to be constantly improving her conditioning and also improving skills. So
completely contradicting.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on, and weight gain in CrossFitters is a really, really tough thing. Because what happens is you gain weight and you're like, hell yeah, my barbell movements are getting better. But what happens when your barbell movements get better? Your gymnastics movements generally get worse, and your conditioning may or may not suffer as well.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is just this constant give and take of bulking, and then kind of make. All right, so let's break it down. Actually, okay. So I think the optimal route, Cheryl, is for you to look at this thing in a periodized cycle, like anything else, and going through a period where the focus becomes weight gain and barbell movement heavy. Maybe you're doing a bit more Olympic lifting, definitely doing more of the deadlifting and benching and strict overhead pressing and bent over rowing and stuff like that. Probably trying to put your gymnastics work on as much of a maintenance as you can feasibly handle. Making sure that you're still doing your handstand push-ups and your muscle-ups and your butterfly pull-ups and all that stuff. Probably trying to minimize conditioning work as much, again, as you can. So if we're looking at this thing as maybe 50 to 60% of your training volume during a weight gain phase is going to need to be focused on those barbell movements. Maybe 20% onto your gymnastics work, just kind of maintaining skills and working on progressions and stuff like that. And then probably another 20, 25% on your conditioning work. I would use your barbell movements as your metric-based movements for sure. You have to choose probably at least one movement pattern or one lift for each movement pattern. So we have our squat pattern, our hip hinge, our horizontal push-pull, and our vertical push-pull. I think she needs to have a metric-based movement for each one of those areas of the body, and she needs to be seeing that number go up. I don't want her to focus on her 1 rep max or her 3 rep max going up. And I know that seems more relevant for CrossFit, where you're like, well, if I'm going to be doing these slow barbell movements, I should probably make sure that like my maximal strength is going up on them. But I don't think that maximal strength is a good proxy for muscle gain at all. There's tons of guys out there that can deadlift 600, 700 pounds that weigh 2/3 of what I weigh. So I don't think that's a good proxy at all. I think using hypertrophy zone sets, a lot of like what we discussed in the beginning of the podcast, your 5 to 10, your 10 to 20, even your 20 to 30s, and seeing yourself go up on those. So maybe we have a deadlift, and that's a technical movement. So we're going to deadlift or RDL in the 5 to 10 rep range. I feel like anything over 10 reps of a deadlift or an RDL on my low back is just fatiguing too much. So 5 to 10 range for those. Same with the squat. I think you can probably go into the 10 to 15 range for things like bench presses and overhead presses, pull-ups and stuff like that. Obviously strict, no butterfly here. And I think that as long as week to week, you're seeing your strength in these rep ranges go up and you're able to accumulate more total work. So I don't just want to see that your deadlift is going up for 3 sets of 5 to 10. I'd like to see a month or two from now that you're doing 5 or 6 sets of 5 to 10 with the same weight that you were doing 3 sets. So now your density is improving as well, right? And as long as you're seeing these constant improvements and the scale weight is going up, then I think that you're definitely along the right path at that point.
I think that's a great answer, man. I like I think not enough people do this. I actually heard Jason Frugia said this like 6-7 years ago, and I took it ever since. It's like picking like a 7, 8, or 9 rep range. I would say somewhere in between 8 to 10 is probably going to be best, and actually working on your max lift for that. Like something I do for my chest is I actually look more so at my 8 rep dumbbell flat bench press as like a really good indicator of if I'm building muscle in my chest, in my triceps, because the dumbbell lets me isolate more than the barbell for me personally. It's not for everybody, but and that 8 rep zone is like just a really good zone to be like, I'm in the muscle growth rep zone, but it's like more of an endurance style stuff than a strength. Cause I agree. I don't think strength is that good. You do need to get stronger somehow, but I think the 8 is like a good blend in between. Same thing with like a T-bar row. That's just a great way for me. If I drive my elbows low, I can really isolate my lats. My body weight or my grip doesn't really negatively impact that. So I like it more than a chin up. Or I would say a pull down would be another good version of this, but looking at my 8 rep max for that too. So I really like that. I don't know if I could add too much to that. I think one thing I would say, or if this person approached me as a client, my first question would be like, are you talking about upcoming comp, or are we looking at your next off season? Because in my mind I go, well, shit, if you're within 3 to 4 months of your next comp, like don't even worry about that. Like do everything you can to just keep performing, because whatever you do right now got you there in the first place. Next off season, it's actually lower, like you said, bring your conditioning, your gymnastics, stuff like that to maintenance volume, and then bring up hypertrophy volume. Maintain everything you're doing, the skill that got you there, and then let's build muscle for 4 or 5 months, and then spend another 4 or 5 months before the next comp bringing back that conditioning up. If I were in a position where this person was like, I can't bring anything down to maintenance, and I do have a comp coming up, because this is like, it seems like a complicated question, so I can assume the situation is probably pretty complex. I would probably add some like very safe volume that could potentially add muscle in a place that's not going to hurt you. Because why do you need to build muscle for this? Is it an aesthetic reason? Like, do you need to build more weight? Like, in my mind, I would say like, shit, let's build your traps, your lats, your glutes, your hamstrings, because those are not going to hurt anything. It's not going to put you in more protraction or any bad positions that you're too anterior dominant. And I've never seen anybody not press more, clean more, squat more from building their back, even if it's not directly, you know what I mean? It's very indirect. And it's just such safe volume. If you add muscle on your back, you're not going to hurt yourself in any way.
Yeah. She does have the CrossFit Games coming up here in end of July. So I think that your point was very well taken, and that now is not the time for her to go on a hypertrophy phase at all. Like, this is something she should consider a month after the games, when she's letting all that cortisol and stuff kind of flush out. And maybe like end of August is a good time for her to embark on a hypertrophy phase. And, that'd be the approach I'd take.
I love it. Can distance runners substitute part of their weekly mileage with energy systems training and get better at running? What kind of energy systems training would you recommend? It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know a whole lot about distance running, aside from the fact that it really sucks and I don't do it. But I do know a little bit about energy systems work. So from what I understand about distance running is that the majority of training that you do in preparing for your distance running is not necessarily running that distance. Like if you're running a half marathon, you don't do a lot of work in the 10 to 13 mile range. You do a lot of work in the like 4 to 6 mile range. And I think that using energy systems work is a great way to do that. I don't necessarily think that energy systems work in the like 1 to 3 minute time domain is going to be the best use of your time, just because the transfer probably isn't going to be quite as good. But energy systems work can go out a little bit longer. You can do 6-minute repeats, 8-minute repeats, stuff like that. If this athlete were to want to use shorter energy systems work, I don't see a problem with that either. I just think you need to accumulate a little bit more distance and volume, because the volume of work that she's trying to do on game day is significant. So if we're doing 400-meter repeats, I think the rest period needs to be extremely short. We want to keep these as aerobic as possible. So maybe it's like run 400 meters, walk 100, run 400, walk 100, something like that. Whereas for somebody who is a CrossFitter or working more in like the glycolytic zone, it might be more of like a 1-to-1 or a 1-to-2 or a 2-to-1 or something like that. But I think trying to stay as aerobic as possible in the energy systems work is probably a good play. And I don't really have a whole lot to add beyond that.
I actually, so I'm in a similar position. I don't have a ton of experience with runners, but I did have a client come to me when I was in the gym working still, who ran marathons, and she didn't tear her Achilles, but she had a pretty bad injury to her Achilles. So basically she couldn't run, and she had like one final, like, I don't know if it was a half or a full marathon to run. I don't know how many months down the road. And when I told her, I'm like, there is no option. So I just tested the theory of exactly what they're asking. And I was like, we're just going to do energy systems that's very easy on your joints and on your foot, but we're going to stay in that kind of oxidative zone. We actually did a lot of even some 3-minute repeats for like a really short period. But what we did is like I had her doing this probably 3 or 4 times a week. Sled drags. One day was like 3 minutes on, 1 minute off. One day was 20 minutes just nonstop marching.
Yep.
A lot of assault bike and rower, but doing the same similar stuff. Like let's go for 10 minutes, take a rest, 10 minutes, take a rest, 8 minutes, take a rest, different things like that. And she actually had her best time. And I contributed to not necessarily that we improved her running, but that we improved her joint health, and she probably had less aches and pains and was able to do it. So we probably maintained her energy systems. But I think like that's the thing about a heart and your lungs. It's a system. It does, like my teacher used to always say this, and I always say it all the time. I love it. Your muscles are stupid, right? They don't know that you are using a cable rope extension for a face pull. They just know that you are doing external rotation with your shoulders, and they have to fire the rear delts and the traps. I believe that there's a similarity with the entire oxidative aerobic system. Like it knows it has to breathe. It knows it has to go through this pattern. So whatever equipment you use to do that, I don't think is going to be a huge difference. But I still do believe from a neurological standpoint, if you've never ran before and you've only done row and stuff, I don't think you're going to be the best marathon runner. So you do have to do the skill, but I do think you can substitute quite a bit of it. And I would actually recommend it if you plan on having longevity in your joints.
Yeah. And then also one other kind of related aspect is that doing energy systems work may actually increase your gait, the proficiency of your gait, of your stride, of the technique that you use when you run, because we've all been in that situation where we're at like mile 7 and we just start kind of like boom, 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 like trudging along. But if you're just having to do like 2 minutes of work at a time with short rest periods, that short rest period might be enough so that you can kind of re-engage the mind muscle connection with your stride and kind of institute better technical proficiency in the movement.
I love that, dude. That's a really good point. And I think me and Bryan are on the same point with a lot of our clients. We don't put a ton of running in if aesthetics is the goal. Right. I think it's for people out there listening who think they need to run for an aesthetic purpose or physique purpose. I think you're better off doing a lot of sled work, assault bike, rower, things that are going to be very joint friendly. Because there's just no reason. And the only clients I allow, I shouldn't say allow because I don't control anybody, but that I tell like, go ahead and keep running are the people that are like, hey, like this is my getaway. Like it's a mental break, like stuff like right. that. I think it's okay. But 100% agree. All right. We got like 6 or 7 questions left. So let's start cranking through these because we got about 20 minutes left.
For sure.
Can you discuss, this is actually a really good question too. This came from the podcast private forum that I have. Can you discuss your opinions on warm-ups? I saw Bryan had a recent post stating you are warming up too much, which I actually really like. With FIT and Functional Muscle 2.0, which are two of my programs, I know you have a daily warm-up in there and then your priming circuits before getting into the lifting. How much is enough versus what is optimal if time isn't a factor? And does your warm-up change when doing a full body routine versus splits like an upper, lower, or push-pull legs with the general warm-up and then a warm-up sets for the actual lifts? So there's a lot of parts to this, but I'm excited for your answer, and I know I have mine.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like I'm going to forget some components of the question as I'm answering it too. But yeah, I made this post because I was just getting a barrage of questions of people being like, "Why don't you include warm-ups in your programs? How should I warm up for the day? Blah blah blah, all this stuff." And what I realized is that like I write very aesthetic, physique-focused programs at this point. Like I still have my CrossFit clients and my performance-based clients, but a lot of what I do, especially in my general programs, is more physique-focused. So I just was starting to realize that there's so much time wasted and energy wasted in preparation. And then I started thinking further about it, and I was like, okay, if you are so gnarled and beat up and your joints hurt so much that you feel like you need to do a 20 or 30 minute like fully encompassing banded warm up with foam rolling and lacrosse balling and TRX or not TRX, what's the crossover symmetry, and you want to do all these crazy warm ups just so that you can sit under a bar and do like 15 reps with an empty barbell back squat, then that shit's crazy. Like you should take back squats out of your program if that's what you need to do a back squat. So that was like my initial kind of impetus for writing this post. And then with that said, to kind of qualify a little bit more, I think that people doing physique focused programs do not need to warm up as much. They shouldn't need them for preparation on those movements. You should be able to get under whatever your first movement is with 5 minutes of prep, whether that's a little bit of foam rolling on your low back, maybe a teeny bit of targeted lacrosse ball into a shoulder joint so that you can get into like good back squat position. I always include Jefferson curls. I think that that's like the number one thing that I include every day, no matter what I'm training. I do 2 reps of Jefferson curl with an empty barbell, and each rep is like 30 seconds long. And by the time I finish my second rep, I'm like, all right, let's do this. I'm ready. So I'm a huge fan of that for like physique style training. I very much believe that everything I said does not apply if you're doing Olympic lifting. If you're going into the gym and part A for you is squat snatch, you better put in 20 minutes of warm up minimum. PVC pipe work, band pull aparts, face pulls, kettlebell or dumbbell overhead squats, one arm presses, hip mobility, ankle mobility, thoracic mobility. I mean, endless amounts of things that you need to do to be able to get into position to catch that barbell overhead in proper position. So that is I know I missed some parts of this. I'm going to take it off for 1 second. What did I miss over here? Circuits before, how much is enough for its optimal factor? Yeah, so as you get older, where'd you go? Where are you? There you are. As you get older, you definitely need more warm up too. And so I think that that's something that you keep in mind, is that as your joints get more brittle, in the winter time, you might need a little bit more warm up too than you may in the summer. But it's been a revelation for me at 36 years old to switch my style of training from more of this like CrossFit Olympic lifting, powerlifting focused stuff into more of the physique focused, where I was having to warm up for 20 to 30 minutes. And it was that notion of, is this really a good use? Is this really good training for me if I have to do this much warm up to prepare for my training? And then to still have my joints kind of feel like shit the next day. So being able to come into this physique style focused training and really be able to just walk into the gym and then 5 minutes later have an empty barbell on my back is really a revelation.
Yeah, I mean, 100% agree. I think that something that came to mind is I used to have a training partner that was like really into warming up, and I was always more jacked. And I think I had more time to do more volume, like, and I never really got injured. You know what I mean? And my knee injuries that a lot of people know about have never been from lifting weights. They're from soccer and different things like that. So, and in soccer, I was sprinting and kicking. I warmed up. Like, it's a different thing. to answer his question about my programs, FIT and FM 2.0, those are ebooks. I don't know who's purchasing them. For my safety and liability, it has a warm up in there. You know what I mean? Like I have to like put that out there because, and it says do 1 to 3 rounds. And I literally go through, they do ankle mobility, hip mobility. They do some stability stuff, some overhead reach, some like breath work, like very basic. And it's not to rehabilitate anybody. It's just to prevent and cover my bases as much as possible because I really don't know who's buying it. When I have a personal client working with me, I'm very similar to you. It's 5 minutes long. Like I'll look at their assessment and I'll be like, hey, your ankle mobility is garbage. I want you to move your ankles and maybe roll out your thoracic spine and then just do some warm-up sets, right? Like get your body working. My warm-up right now for me personally is 5 to 10 minutes on the assault bike. It's because it's 7 a.m. It's cold in my garage and I just had knee surgery. Like that's full, like that's all it is. And then I do, 2, 3, 4 warm-up sets and then I start training. I just find that people, I'm with you, man. I think people tire themselves out in the warm-up. And unless you're doing something like an Olympic lift, which those workouts aren't a ton of crazy volume. You focus on a few lifts and you get really good at that lift. And you need that mobility to do that. For aesthetics, I think it's more important to do – I like priming. And so priming for me is part of the workout. It's not part of the warm-up. And I do that because if you're going to bench safely and get the most out of it, you should probably do some kind of external rotation. You should fire your back. If you're going to do a squat or a deadlift, you should probably fire your glutes or hamstrings and do some kind of anti-rotation or some kind of core stability work. That's going to improve external rotation of the hip. You're going to have a better deadlift, better squat. But it's not really a warm-up. It's actually like I consider that added volume for the upper back and everything.
It's part of like ramp-up work almost.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think that that's also like a super misunderstood area is that like the number of people that I think understand training, and I have to tell them that what I'm writing are the work sets. So like I wrote a blog on the Evolved website and I was just called like ramp-up sets and RPE and something else. It was basically like, here's a bunch of shit that you need to know. And like ramp-up sets, man, if I'm going to back squat, if my goal is to reach a heavy set of 5 on back squat, I'm probably doing like 5 or 6 sets to prepare for that, starting with an empty barbell for 15 and ending with 355 for a single before 375 for 5 or something like that. Like people need to understand ramp-up sets better. And I think as you understand ramp-up sets, you can actually begin to use them as part of your mobility prep. So like my first set of 15 back squats with an empty bar, every rep is done with a 3-second negative. I'm pausing at the bottom and I'm kind of like twisting a little side to side and I'm kind of bouncing at the bottom and feeling my hips open up and exploding up at the top, maybe even getting like a jump squat in there so I can get explosive out of the bottom. And as the weights go up, range of motion shouldn't change. So that range of motion that you've established as your base criteria range of motion at that with the empty barbell is the same range of motion that I'm going to use in all my ramp up sets as I build in weight and increase reps up until I get to that massive work set at the top.
I really like that. I'm the same way. And I've had to explain the same thing because I don't put them in my programming. But I've had a lot of, which he's a good friend of mine, somebody I've looked up to for a long time. I've hung out a lot of times. John Russin, he has a very popular program called FHT. Great program. But I've had a lot of clients come from them to work with me on nutrition, or I've had clients that have just bought his ebook and they're like, fuck, it seems like so much volume. And I'm like, did you read the section about ramp up sets? Like it's not all, because he'll put like 3 times 6, 4 times 6. It's like 7 sets of 6. I'm like, no. It's not like that. And I even did that. Like, so I beta tested his program years ago, like me and some guys in Seattle when he came to visit us before the ebook even launched, like years ago. And I thought the same thing. I was like, fuck, this is a lot of volume. And he was like, no, dude, like ramp up. He came into town and we did it with him. And I was like, oh shit, I've been doing this wrong. Like just smashing myself.
I remember you guys actually talking about this exact topic on the podcast you did with him.
Mm-hmm.
So that was cool.
Yeah. Great topic. Yeah. So the last part about that question is do your warm-ups change when doing full body routines versus upper lower? I would say the primers do, not necessarily the warm-up. I think warm-ups are for like, I don't really do it right now because my knee has been feeling so much better. But for weeks I was doing a warm-up and it was the same every day because it was rehabilitation for my knee. So if you have an injury and you're doing a warm-up for that injury, frequency is the best thing, not volume. So don't sit there for an hour doing it because you're just going to beat the joint up. Do it a little bit, but do it all the time. So I don't think your warm-ups necessarily need to change. However, primers obviously do. What is your compound lift? Your primer is probably going to be suited for that lift, right? If you're squatting, maybe upper back and hamstring work with a side plank. If you're just benching, you can probably get away with just some face pulls or just some pull downs. Or if you want to be explosive and get the nervous system going, maybe a throw or a explosive push-up or a jam ball slam, something along those lines that's safe, but it's going to fire the nervous system. So I think me and Bryan both agree on that. Warm-ups probably don't change if you need them, and then primers probably do.
Yeah, probably less ramp-up sets. If you're doing like a similar movement pattern, you may not need a single ramp-up set for the second exercise in the movement pattern. Whereas you can just do a shit ton of them for bench, but then when you get to dumbbell bench, you can just maybe do one set or no sets and jump right into your work sets.
Yep, 100% agree. Staying on routine as much as possible while traveling for 14 days. What is the best hotel workout to keep my muscles stimulated to not lose any size during the trip? Body weight only. Obviously, I don't know if we can like lay out a full program for you, but do you have any tips on what he should be doing?
So I think in a perfect world, I would plan it so that the first week of that 14 days is a deload week, which basically means that you can do minimal work or nothing at all and just kind of recover during that time. So maybe you overreach a little bit the prior week. With that said, I think that the best thing you can do to maintain or even build and instigate some additional stimulus during this period of time is a shit ton of metabolite work. Man, grab a rock and do a 1 minute AMRAP of air squats and then rest 1 minute and do that 5 times. You can basically repeat that for any muscle group. You know, you can take you can do handstand push-ups on a wall. You can do wall climbs. You can do pike push-ups where the butt goes up and pikes over. I used to bring rings with me every time I would travel because you just find a tree branch somewhere and now you can do pull-ups and push-ups and ring rows, and rings are $33 on Amazon and you literally can just pack them in your bag and they don't take up any space. So I think super high rep and just building lactic acid. Like the more that you can feel that burn and do those like super high rep shitty ass sets that make you want to puke, that should suffice pretty well for a week.
Yeah. I've filled up water bottles and done like rear delt and trap complexes like YTIs and Blackburns laying on the floor. I think I saw a video of you doing inverted rows on a fucking treadmill. Like,
Yep.
Be creative. You can hang around and do shit. I remember when I was in Hawaii, I ran down to the beach and I grabbed some towels and I was doing sprints. I did push-ups. I did something similar to the rock with air squats, but it was like a little log. And then I threw the towels over the branch and I did chin-ups, bow chin-ups, you know what I mean? And I'm hitting everything. So I think you just really do have to get creative. It can be a time to have fun with it. Don't necessarily worry about progressing. I would 100% agree with you. Peek into it where you can take a good week off and then have fun, be creative, just get your heart rate going, hit your muscles and leave. Just, you know what I mean? Like, don't stress too much about it.
Yep.
I think sometimes people overestimate like how quickly you can lose progress or quickly you can lose muscle. Like, it takes time, you know, like I had surgery and I was out for over 3 months. Like, I lost 2.5, 3 pounds of my leg. That was 3 to 4 months of literally not doing shit on my left leg. It takes some time. Like, people go on vacation, you're going to be okay.
Honestly, if you do it right and you overreach and you head into that deload week, you might actually find that you take the first 5 to 7 days of that vacation off completely. And then you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, oh my God, I'm jacked right now.
Mm-hmm. You know what's funny about that? Today was my first lift in 4 days because I had my bachelor party and it was just like a weekend to like get away, like, you know what I mean? Relax. And obviously I didn't sleep as much as I had planned because I was in Vegas. But after coming home, deciding to not train again because I felt like shit, I slept more, didn't train again because I still felt like shit. And this is just body awareness. Slept more. Today I was like, I feel really good. I had a great training session and I actually looked more jacked than when I left.
That's right, man. You just got to let that inflammation flush out, get some sleep, and put some carbohydrates back in your body, and you're good to go.
Yeah. All right. Let's. This is a good one. What type of workout would you recommend to someone who's showing signs of adrenal fatigue?
Yeah, I actually went through this, and I think I may have covered this on your podcast, if not, definitely on a different podcast. But I went through this in 2015, 2016 timeframe, and the only thing that really got me through it was changing to a 2 times a week full body program. And it worked wonders. It took a while. Adrenal fatigue is a chronic disorder, right? So it's not something that you can just cure overnight or in even a month usually. So for me, I trained 2 times a week. I had one hip hinge or squat pattern movement, one horizontal or vertical push, and one horizontal or vertical pull in each workout. So there was 3 movements one day, 3 movements the other day. I did that twice a week, and it literally took like 4 or 5 months of me doing that to start feeling better and more energized and feeling like I wanted to add in a little bit more volume at that point.
I think people underestimate like how much you need to rest.
Yeah.
Like it's pretty fucking serious. If you really, so, and I think there's 2 ways to answer this question. I think one way is, do you really have adrenal fatigue? If somebody comes in and they're like, they hear all these things, it's like, if you're just overtaxed, it's just a matter of dropping volume. I will take CrossFitters who think they're adrenal fatigued, and I don't think they actually are, because the signs of true HPA axis dysfunction, if we want to use the real technical term, it's like very fucking serious, you know? So if they actually have it, 100% agree with you. Keep it simple. Just go through the functional movement pattern so you keep the skill and the neurological ability to just do the movement. But 2 times a week, 3 at most, and you're just like taking it really easy. I agree with you.
No cardio.
No cardio. You can go on a walk maybe, but like it's because you're just taking a casual walk with the dog, nothing purposeful.
Nope.
If you're somebody who is just doing too much work and let's say you don't clinically have it, I would just put you on a bodybuilding program. I have plenty of CrossFitters that came to me and I'm like, hey, you're doing 5 or 6 days a week of this. I want you to do like 1 or 2, spend the other days doing bodybuilding. And it's nothing under 8 reps. It's all very slow tempos. I purposely plug in like controlled negatives, controlled concentrics. So I don't want them being explosive, longer rest periods, less volume. And it's just like, hey, spend time learning how to activate your muscles and going through proper joint mechanics. But
yeah, that was actually the whole reason I built Evolve Training Systems originally. Was it was to cater to burnout CrossFitters, and it's expanded from there into a whole bunch of different stuff now. But yeah, when it first started, that was my target market, and they just flooded to it, and everyone was like, within months, they were just like, oh my god, I feel like a new person, and blah blah blah. So you're 100% right. Just the standard bodybuilding style training works for people that aren't actually HP1 axis function.
It's a really hard buy-in too. I've had plenty of those people that you're like, hey, just trust me. And they're like, but I love this. It takes them so long to buy in. And it's like, just give me 3 fucking weeks. Yep. And they're like, wow, I feel better. Hey, I PR'd on my muscle ups. Oh, hey, I PR'd on my clean. It's like,
right.
Weird.
I know. I get that all the time. Like, yeah, it's just amazing. It's super cool.
So we're going to finish off with this question. This is something I actually put in here because I think it would be really cool for us to kind of go over this. I think people would be interested. And I'm interested. I'm always interested by my guests. And I should probably ask this more because this is always something I wonder. But the question is, how are you each currently training? So what is your current training split or routine? And like, what are you focusing on right now?
So since I got back from Costa Rica, February 1st, I spent the entire time all the way until last week on a push, pull, legs, upper, lower. And I usually would do that over 8 to 9 days. So I wasn't trying to fit 5 sessions into a calendar week. I was allowing myself a little bit more rest in there because I just felt a little beat up. I was kind of getting back into the swing of things in the US and just kind of trying to adapt to life. And it worked incredibly well. I instituted a lot of the sub-failure techniques that we talked about in the beginning, building volume over time, building proximity to failure over time. And what I found at the 2 weeks ago, at the end of my kind of 4-month progression through it, was that I feel 1,000 times better. I'm sleeping better. My strength has actually gone up. And most importantly, my response to the rep range has gone up, like we've been talking about, where it's not just my maximal strength, because I don't even test that shit anymore, but like my 6 to 10 or 10 to 15 rep range numbers have gone up. So I was so happy with that and enjoyed the process so much that starting this week, I am now taking it slightly more advanced, and now I'm going push, pull, legs, push, pull, legs. And my intention is actually to fit that into a 7-day calendar week where I'm doing 6 sessions over 7 days. I'm not going to hold myself super accountable to that. If I feel like I need rest or whatever, I'll take an extra rest day and make it 8 or 9 days. But one super cool aspect of this is that I am able to keep my sessions absolutely under an hour. And most of them right now are 45 minutes or less. So I do try and build volume and accumulate load and proximity to failure week to week. So right now in week 1, all of my sessions so far have been under 45 minutes, which is super sick. Like a general day for me. Yesterday I did 3 sets of dumbbell incline, 3 sets of chest flies with a cable, 3 sets of lateral raises, and 2 sets of triceps. So I had 11 total sets. And that will build over time. That'll probably go 1.5 times as much volume 4 weeks from now. Maybe 1 3/4 times, not a whole lot. But basically all of my days are going to emulate a similar pattern. And the coolest part that I'm the most excited about with this new program is that I am finally part of a standard Globo style gym, and I can work on my deficient quad game. I am extremely posterior dominant. My deadlift and my RDLs, my hip thrusts, all of the glute and hamstring stuff comes easy to me and is fun. And all of the quad stuff is just a nightmare waiting to happen. And when I try and back squat, when it gets heavy enough, I start hinging at the hip and caving over because my hamstrings and glutes want to take over and my quads can't sustain power through the middle portion of the movement. So I'm really, really excited to institute hack squats and leg presses. For the first time in 20 plus years of training, I'm actually taking back squats out. So I've never done this before, 20 years. I'm going to take back squats out for a 3 to 4 month period, see how my quads respond to the new stimulus, and then put the back squats back in and see how my body responds to that.
I think you'll have good results from it, dude. I think too many people, the back squat is a perfect movement. I love it. And I think it's good and important, especially for strength. But I do think for a hypertrophy stimulus, because I do the same thing with my hips. I even found like I started doing dead squats. I'll take the trap bar and flip it completely upside down. And taking that squat pattern allows me to stay more upright, knees glide forward a little bit more, or Zercher squat. Like I get more quad stimulus. The problem is I can't go as heavy. So it's kind of like a give or take. But I like that, man. It's funny because upper lower push pull legs or push pull legs upper lower, that's absolutely my favorite split. And what I like about what you said is letting people know. I think more people need to understand that like not every microcycle has to be 7 days, right? Like I think it's okay to spread that out. And as you become a more advanced lifter, I think it's good because you can be more intuitive and be like, you know what, I need another day of rest and spread that out. And it's not, you know, Sunday doesn't need to be rest day. Monday doesn't need to be bench day. Like it's okay to switch these things up.
Yeah, for sure, man. I agree 100%. And then the more I'm nice to myself, and when I kind of wake up and on the wrong side of the bed and I don't have that like fire to go train, and then I take that rest day or I go for a walk or something like that, I always come into the gym the next day and there's never a moment where I'm like, oh fuck, I can't believe I took that rest day. I feel terrible today. You know, it's like every day I feel so much better because I took the rest day, and I have a more productive session out of it, and I can get more volume and recover better.
Yeah. And I think like, and this is just my guess, but doing the push pull legs, I'm sure you're going to accumulate volume. And after a while, you're probably going to shift back to less days per week because it's good to have those blocks of like a ton of volume and a ton of frequency. And then you kind of pull away, have more rest and bring it back in, which is kind of what I've actually done lately. So for me, because of my knee injury, I've been kind of going through like a crazy period of time. But when the knee injury happened, it was obviously 3 days a week of upper body. And that was it. Like there was nothing else I could do. I was on crutches and I was limited. Everything had to be seated. And then after surgery, I took a full week off. And then I got into, again, 3 days a week upper body. Once I could actually get off crutches and I started like doing rehab for my knee, I went to it was 3 days a week of upper, 2 days a week of lower, because my lower body was very minimal. And then I went to and I actually really like this split for a brief amount of time because it's very intense, but upper, lower, upper, lower, upper, lower. So you're doing 3 days a week of every muscle group. And it's been working really well. I've been doing this for 8 weeks now and it's been going well and I've been accumulating volume. So starting next week, I'm actually changing to a upper, lower rest, push, pull legs rest. And the reason being is because over these last 8 weeks, my upper body has been progressing because obviously I'm lifting a lot, but my lower body, yeah, exactly. And my lower body is finally starting to push real weight. So I was probably above maximum recoverable volume from a normal standpoint on my upper body, but I was so low on volume on my lower body then my nervous system has been totally fine. But
Yeah.
these last couple of weeks, I'm starting to kind of dance on that fine line, because even though I'm only doing like 4 exercises a session for my legs, I'm building volume. I'm starting to go heavier. Like I'm actually pulling some heavier weights on a hip thrust or a RDL. I can't do heavy squats yet, but I've actually been implementing a lot of leg extensions in high volume and just like pausing and getting my quad to fire like crazy. But I could tell my nervous system starting to be like, okay, things are getting real again. So
Deload week.
yeah, exactly. So this is actually my deload week right now, which worked out perfect because I just got back from Vegas. And then next week it'll be upper, lower, push, pull legs. And I think that's going to be a good mix.
I have a question for you. I always ask this of people when I hear that they're on an upper lower 6 day a week or 6 day microcycle.
Yeah.
Are you actually hitting all areas of the upper body each day, or are there times where you're like, I'm going to do a dip and call this chest and triceps? Or are you like targeting each specific area each day?
Yeah. So so I have help from a Chris Barricat helped me. We actually did it. So day 1 is pretty much everything. It's a little bit lower rep, but still nothing like below 6 reps, hitting everything. Like it's probably my longest day in the gym, but it's, I'd probably do, chest, shoulders, triceps, biceps at the end, lats, upper back. Like I really do hit everything.
Okay.
The second upper body day is more just like heavy push and pull, not much shoulder. And then the third upper body day is much more shoulder and bicep.
That's what I was wondering. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of figured it would be that way versus equally distributing the volume for each muscle group throughout each day.
What I've found is I've had a couple clients go through this, actually both of them physique competitors, and one of them really, really liked it spread out like that, but he's very analytical. So when he sees it on paper and his frequency is like perfect in theory, I think he likes it. The other guy is more like me, and I don't think he gets a pump enough in any one muscle because he's just doing a little bit of each. So I think he doesn't enjoy it as much. And that's kind of how I am. Like I like my second and third day because the second day I get an insane chest and back pump. The third day I get an insane arm and shoulder pump.
Right.
But I'm still hitting a little bit of everything every day. So I think it's kind of like depends on the person.
For sure, yeah. And I'm kind of doing the same thing with my leg days too. Like I have one leg day that's a little more quad dominant but has some hams, and another day that's ham dominant that has a little bit of quad. So at least you're still getting that like 2 times a week frequency that science shows is optimal.
Right. 100% agree. Dude, I love this, man. This ended up being really cool. Thank you for coming on, man. I appreciate you jumping on.
Cool.
Doing the question.
Sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, I'm amped, dude. This has been really fun. It's my first Q&A podcast, like I said, where I wasn't like a featured guest. So I hope we have an opportunity to do some more of this stuff in the future.
Absolutely, dude. Before you go, make sure you drop all your links and your Instagram and everything like that so people can follow you if they're not.
Yeah, for sure. I'll make it easy. At Bryan Boorstein on Instagram. You can also find me if you just type in Evolved Training Systems. I'm at evolvedtrainingsystems.com for all things training, generic or one-on-one individual coaching. And that's pretty much it. You should be able to find me that way.
Love it, man. I'm going to link all that in the show notes. And dude, thanks again, once again.
Thank you, sir.
Before I let you go, I just want to say thanks. I seriously appreciate you spending this last hour or so with me, educating yourself to get better results. It still humbles me to this day that people around the world literally have me in their headphones or their speakers just to learn. It's so empowering, and because of that, I have 3 quick things for you. The first one is a personal favor. Please leave me a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. When you do this, not only does it help me learn and get better at making podcasts for you to get better results, but it helps us grow inside of iTunes, which allows us to invest more, again, to get you better results. The second thing, head over to boomboomperformance.com/sign-up or click the link in the show notes to get your free copy of the Nutrition Hierarchy. This is everything you need to know about nutrition to change your body composition or performance inside of a manual. I take the leading evidence inside of research and all the principles, methods, and tools based on some of the top professionals in the industry, and I put them all in a book so you can learn more about your nutrition and get better results. The third thing, this is a personal invitation to shoot me a DM on Instagram or email me at cody@boomboomperformance.com. I will help you troubleshoot anything you need. This is literally an invitation to jump in my inbox and ask me anything you want and let me help you. All right, guys, that's all I got for you this time. I appreciate you being here, and I'll see you next time.